The day Grandpa died, it felt like an entire chapter of my life closed forever. Not because of the money, not because of any inheritance, but because he was the only person in my family who ever looked at me and made me feel like I mattered. The funeral took place on a cold October afternoon in rural Missouri. Gray clouds hung low over the cemetery. The wind carried the smell of rain. People stood around sharing stories about Grandpa, stories about his kindness, his wisdom, his hard work. Most of them sounded sincere. Some didn't, especially my brother, Ryan. Standing beside Grandpa's casket, Ryan looked more interested in checking his watch than saying goodbye. But then again, that wasn't surprising. Ryan had always been the golden child, the favorite, the son who could do no wrong, the one Dad bragged about, the one Mom protected, the one everyone expected to inherit everything. Meanwhile, I was simply Emily, the daughter who never seemed good enough, the daughter who made different choices, the daughter who moved away instead of staying in town, the daughter who didn't fit into the family's picture-perfect expectations. Even Grandpa noticed it. Years earlier, he once told me something I never forgot. Kiddo, sometimes families see people for who they were instead of who they are. At the time, I didn't fully understand. Now I did. After the funeral, everyone gathered at the attorney's office. The atmosphere changed almost immediately. The sadness disappeared. The anticipation arrived. People weren't thinking about Grandpa anymore. They were thinking about the will, thinking about money, thinking about property, thinking about what they might get. I sat quietly near the back. Ryan sat front and center, smiling, confident, certain. The attorney opened a folder. "Thank you all for coming." Everyone became silent. The reading began. Grandpa's truck went to my uncle. Several investments were divided among relatives. Family heirlooms were assigned. Then came the big announcement. The Carter family farm shall pass to Ryan Carter. Exactly as everyone expected. Mom smiled proudly. Dad nodded. Ryan leaned back in his chair and smirked. The farm had been valued at nearly $5 million. Hundreds of acres, equipment, buildings, everything. The crown jewel of the family. The room buzzed with approval. Ryan glanced at me. That look, that familiar look, the one that said, "I won again." Then the lawyer continued. Several minutes passed. More assets, more distributions. Finally, he reached the end. I waited. Nothing. No mention of my name. Not once. I felt my stomach tighten. Surely there had been some mistake. The lawyer closed the folder. "That concludes the will." Silence filled the room. Then Ryan laughed. Not loudly, just enough. Just enough for me to hear it. "Guess Grandpa forgot somebody." A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. I wanted the floor to open beneath me. Not because I expected money, but because it hurt. Deep down, it hurt. Grandpa and I had been close, closer than anyone knew. Every Sunday afternoon for nearly 20 years, I'd visited his house, helped around his house, listened to his stories, took him to appointments, brought groceries, sat with him when he was lonely. And now it looked like none of that mattered. Ryan stood up. "I'm starving." People began leaving. The meeting was over, or so everyone thought. Just as I grabbed my purse, the lawyer cleared his throat. "Actually," the room stopped. "I almost forgot." Ryan turned around. The lawyer reached beneath the table and removed a small wooden box. Old, worn, locked. He looked directly at me. "Emily." My heart skipped. "This was left specifically for you." Confused murmurs filled the room. The lawyer handed me the box. Ryan frowned. "What is it?" The lawyer shrugged. "I wasn't told." I carefully examined it. The wood looked ancient. A small brass lock held it shut. Attached to the top was a yellow envelope. My name appeared in Grandpa's handwriting. Suddenly, the room felt very quiet. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. My hands trembled. I unfolded it and began reading. The first sentence made my entire body freeze. "If you're reading this, Emily, it means they think I left you nothing." My eyes widened. Ryan's smirk disappeared. The room grew silent. I continued. "That's exactly what I wanted them to believe." My pulse quickened. I could feel every person staring at me, wondering, waiting. The next line hit even harder. "Because the real inheritance isn't in the will." The lawyer looked confused. Dad looked confused. Mom looked confused. Ryan looked angry. I kept reading. "Inside the box is a key. That key opens something I've protected for 40 years. 40 years? The room went completely still. Then came the final sentence, the sentence that changed everything. "Trust nobody until you know what's hidden beneath the old red barn." I stopped breathing. The old red barn. Everyone in the family knew exactly which barn he meant. The abandoned structure sitting on the far edge of the farm. A building nobody had entered in decades. Ryan suddenly stood up. "What does that mean?" For the first time all day, he looked nervous, very nervous. I slowly folded the letter and looked at the wooden box, because somehow I knew Grandpa's final secret was about to change everything. And judging by the expression on Ryan's face, he knew it too. The drive to Grandpa's farm felt longer than it ever had before. The entire way there, Ryan followed behind me in his truck. Close. Too close. Like he was afraid I might disappear, or worse, find whatever Grandpa had hidden before he could. By the time we reached the property, the sun was beginning to set. The old red barn stood exactly where it always had. Weathered. Silent. Forgotten. At least that's what everyone believed, for 40 years. The moment I stepped out of my car, Ryan approached me. "Whatever's in there belongs to the farm." I looked at him. "No, it belongs to Grandpa. Grandpa left the farm to me." I smiled. "And he left the key to me." His jaw tightened. For the first time in my life, Ryan had no answer. The rest of the family arrived shortly afterward. Apparently, word had spread quickly. Mom, Dad, uncles, cousins. Everyone suddenly became interested in Grandpa's final secret. Funny how that works. When they thought I'd received nothing, nobody cared. Now everybody wanted to know what was inside the barn. I unlocked the wooden box. Inside sat a small, rusted key. Beneath it was another folded note. Grandpa's handwriting again. I opened it carefully. If Ryan is standing nearby, he's probably already angry. A few people laughed nervously. Ryan didn't. I continued reading. Good. That got everyone's attention. Because some lessons take a lifetime to learn. My heart pounded. The note contained detailed instructions leading to a specific location inside the barn. Nothing more. We entered together. Dust floated through the air. The wooden floor creaked beneath our feet. Sunlight slipped through broken boards. The place smelled like old timber and memories. Following Grandpa's directions, I counted 12 support beams, then 7 steps towards the back wall, then 3 steps left, exactly as instructed. There, hidden under decades of dust, was an old steel hatch. The entire family stared. Nobody spoke. Ryan looked stunned. Dad looked pale. Mom covered her mouth. The hatch had clearly been there for years, yet nobody had ever noticed. I inserted the key. The clock clicked. Then I pulled. Slowly. The hatch opened. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Nobody moved. Finally,
It
Dad whispered,
really
"My
is
God." We grabbed
beautiful.
flashlights and headed down. The underground room wasn't large, but what it contained left every person speechless. Shelves, boxes, files, documents, locked containers, everything perfectly preserved. It looked less like a storage room and more like a vault. At the center stood a large metal safe. Attached was another envelope. This one simply read, "For Emily." I opened it. Inside was Grandpa's final letter, the longest one yet. My hands shook as I read. 43 years ago, I started a business with 3 partners. Everyone exchanged confused looks. Nobody had ever heard the story. Within 5 years, the company was worth millions. I continued. The others wanted to sell. I didn't. So I accepted a private settlement and walked away. The room remained silent. Rather than spend the money, I invested it. My breathing stopped. No, no way. Those investments remained hidden because I wanted future generations judged by character, not by wealth. Ryan's face drained of color. The next line hit like lightning. Most of the family failed that test. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Then came the revelation. Emily was the only one who visited when she needed nothing. Tears filled my eyes. She was the only one who showed kindness without expecting a reward. Mom began crying. Dad looked away. That's why
Wow.
everything in this
It
room belongs
really
to
is
Emily. The room
beautiful.
exploded. "What?" Ryan shouted. The lawyer stepped forward. He'd arrived only minutes earlier after receiving a phone call from me. Calmly, he reviewed the documents. Then he looked up. "Your grandfather's instructions are legally binding." Ryan stared. The lawyer continued. "The investment portfolio currently exceeds
Wow.
$81 million.
It really is
Silence. Absolute
beautiful.
silence. Nobody could process the number. $81 million. Dad nearly collapsed into a chair. Mom openly sobbed. My uncle whispered a curse. Ryan simply stood frozen, like somebody had pulled the plug on reality. Then the lawyer revealed one final detail. The farm was worth
Wow.
approximately $5
It
million.
really
Ryan's eyes
is
widened. The hidden
beautiful.
inheritance is worth more than 16 times that amount. I looked at my brother. For years, he'd acted like the winner. For years, he looked down on me. For years, he believed Grandpa chose him. But Grandpa had seen everything. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment. And he'd made his decision accordingly. Ryan finally spoke. "Emily." I knew what was coming. The apology, the excuses, the sudden desire to reconnect. But something strange happened. I wasn't angry anymore. Grandpa had already given me justice. I didn't need revenge. I simply smiled. "You know what's funny?" Nobody answered. For years, everyone thought Grandpa left me nothing. The room remained silent. I held up the first letter. "If you're reading this, they think I left you nothing." Tears rolled down my cheeks. But Grandpa never forgot me. Then I folded the letter and placed it carefully back inside the envelope. Because the truth wasn't that Grandpa made me rich. The truth was much more valuable. He made me feel seen. He made me feel chosen. He made me feel loved. And after a lifetime of being overlooked by my family, that meant more than all $81 million combined. As I walked out of the barn that evening, the sunset stretched across the Missouri sky. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not because I had inherited a fortune, but because Grandpa's final letter proved something I'd secretly hoped all along. The people who truly love you see your worth long before the rest of the world does. And Grandpa saw mine until the very end. The end.